They told her to wait outside. Not in the boardroom she built. Not in the company she saved from collapse. But outside, like a stranger, like she didn't belong. The air in that corridor was heavy. Glass walls on every side, yet it felt like a cage. She could hear them inside, laughing, whispering, making decisions about a future she had created. Her name was on the company's front page, on the awards hanging in that room. But in that moment, she was invisible. No one dared to meet her eyes as they walked past. An intern clutched her files, unsure whether to hand them over or pretend not to see her. Even the security guard avoided her gaze. And for the first time in years, the woman who once commanded a room felt small. What had changed? Not her results. Not her leadership. Just one thing, the color of her skin had finally become a conversation. A new chairman had joined. He smiled too easily, complimented too loudly. Behind Evrim was a layer of condescension so thin you could almost hear it crack when he spoke. She felt it the moment he walked in, that subtle shift, the way meetings started without her, decisions made while she was away. But she played it calm, professional, patient. Because she believed merit always wins. Until today. Please wait outside. We'll call you in shortly, he'd said, voice syrupy sweet, eyes cold as steel. Now, minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Through the glass, she could see the presentation she was supposed to lead, her slides, her research, her strategy, being discussed without her. Her fingerprints were on every number, every graph. But her voice had been silenced. And still, she waited. Her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant, "They're replacing you." The world slowed. For a moment, all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Replacing her? With who? The man who joined 2 months ago? The one she trained? The one who called her like it was an insult wrapped in respect? Something inside her shifted, quiet, controlled, but final. They thought she would leave quietly. They thought humiliation would break her. They didn't know her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Because 2 minutes later, she walked back into that boardroom. And what happened next would end careers, rewrite power, and expose the kind of racism corporate walls were never built to contain. So, what exactly happened behind that glass? And how did one woman turn humiliation into history? Keep watching, because this isn't just a story about a CEO. It's a story about what happens when the system underestimates the wrong woman. Before the glass walls became mirrors of judgment, before her name echoed in whispers instead of applause, Ava Brooks was the kind of leader every company dreamed of having. She wasn't born into power, she built it. Brick by brick. Her story began in a one-bedroom apartment on the South Side, flickering lights, second-hand textbooks, and a mother who worked double shifts so her daughter could dream beyond the horizon. Ava didn't grow up believing the world was fair, but she did believe it could be earned. That belief became her armor. By 32, she had become the youngest financial strategist in her firm's century-long history. By 35, she was the name shareholders trusted when things fell apart. And by 40, she wore the title of CEO, the first black woman to ever hold that position in the company's global network. The headlines celebrated her. A visionary of color leading change. Breaking barriers in corporate America. But inside those boardrooms, the applause had a limit. She noticed it in the subtle ways. The way some executives called her Ava while addressing others as Mr. or Dr. The way her ideas were interesting until repeated by someone else, and suddenly, brilliant. The way diversity was praised publicly but dismissed privately as optics. Still, she stayed calm. Focused. Professional. Ava believed in results, not reactions. And her results were undeniable. Under her leadership, the company hit record profits, expanded into 3 continents, and rebuilt its crumbling reputation. Even her critics had to admit, she made the impossible look effortless. Yet, behind that effortless calm was exhaustion. Every day was a performance, a delicate dance between power and perception. Too firm, and she was labeled aggressive. Too soft, and she was not assertive enough. Every decision, every sentence, every look had to be calibrated. She wore resilience like a designer suit. And no one noticed the cracks forming underneath. Then came Elliot Kane, the new chairman. He arrived with charisma sharp enough to cut glass. Charming, persuasive, the kind of man who could sell frost to the Arctic. He spoke the language of modern leadership, of collaboration and fresh direction. But behind his polished words was something colder, a quiet condescension Ava recognized instantly. He called her kiddo in private meetings. joked about how diversity wins look great in annual reports. And always made sure his praise came with a reminder of hierarchy. Ava had dealt with men like him before, men who feared competence that didn't come in their image. So she did what she'd always done, she outperformed. She let numbers, not words, speak. 4 months, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Board meetings grew colder. Conversations shorter. Rumors louder. Some said Elliot wanted his own team, people he could trust. Others whispered that investors wanted a different face for the next phase of growth. Ava ignored it all. Or tried to. Because deep down, she believed she had earned her seat, and no one could take it without cause. But that illusion cracked one Friday morning. She'd just finalized the company's biggest acquisition in years, a deal that would make headlines, one she'd negotiated herself after 6 sleepless nights and countless rejections. The boardroom was prepped for the announcement. Reporters were waiting in the lobby. Yet, when Ava walked in, something felt off. The smiles were too thin. The air too quiet. Elliot stood at the head of the table, her chair, flipping through her presentation like it was his. "Good morning," she greeted, her voice steady but searching. He didn't look up. "Morning, Ava. We'll begin shortly." Actually, he paused, that rehearsed smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. "Would you mind waiting outside for a bit? We're just reviewing something." It was a small sentence. Just 6 words. But in those 6 words, years of struggle, triumph, and self-control began to unravel. Every eye in the room shifted toward her, some apologetic, others eager to see what she'd do. The same people who'd once cheered her victories now avoided her gaze. Ava froze. A quiet storm behind calm eyes. She could have argued. Could have demanded her right to stay. But she didn't. Because power, she knew, didn't always speak the loudest. Sometimes, it waited. It listened. It watched. So she smiled, that professional, practiced smile, and stepped outside. What she didn't know was that those few minutes would become the turning point of her career. That while she waited in that cold corridor, her future was being rewritten behind glass walls she once believed were transparent. Her story wasn't over. It was just entering the chapter that would expose what those glossy company slogans never dared to show, what really happens when a black woman climbs too high in a world built to keep her below the ceiling. And the next move would be hers. The corridor outside the boardroom felt colder now. The hum of the air conditioner mixed with muffled voices behind the glass, and every word Ava couldn't hear burned louder than the ones she could. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign, not the confident CEO she'd seen that morning, but a woman waiting for permission to exist in the very space she built. Minutes passed. Then, laughter. Elliot's laughter. Followed by applause. Ava leaned closer to the glass. Through the reflection of her own face, she caught fragments of the screen inside, her slides, her data, her words. But the voice presenting them wasn't hers. It was David Cross, the new vice president. The man she'd mentored. The one she'd handpicked 6 months earlier because she believed in giving young talent a chance. He was presenting her deal. Her victory. And Elliot was calling it a new direction. Ava's hand trembled, but she steadied it against the wall. She'd endured worse. She knew how corporate power worked, quietly, politically, ruthlessly. But this was different. This wasn't oversight. This was erasure. 15 minutes later, the boardroom door opened. People streamed out, eyes avoiding hers. A few nodded politely, empty gestures wrapped in guilt. Elliot was last to leave. He stopped beside her. "Ah, Ava," he said, feigning surprise. "Didn't realize you were still waiting. Productive meeting. I'll fill you in later." Then, without a pause, he walked away. The next morning, the press release went live. New leadership team secures landmark deal under strategic chairman Elliot Kane. No mention of her. No photo. No name. Her inbox filled with congratulatory emails, all addressed to Elliot and David. It wasn't just professional theft. It was a message. She was being written out of her own story. Over the next few weeks, the walls began to close in. Projects were reassigned for efficiency. Meetings happened without her. Decisions she used to make were now team discussions. She'd enter rooms and conversations would pause. Her assistant, loyal for 5 years, started avoiding her eyes. HR called it restructuring. Ava called it what it was, sabotage. And it was working. Investors started questioning her leadership. Analysts whispered about loss of confidence. The board began to fracture. The same men who once quoted her in press conferences now spoke about fresh vision. She tried to fight back with facts. She sent reports, data, timelines, proof of her results. But the numbers didn't matter anymore. Perception had replaced truth. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Ava entered a budget meeting to find a document spread across the table, a proposal recommending her temporary leave pending an internal review of conduct. Her conduct. It cited communication issues, departmental instability, and leadership concerns. The language was polished, vague, corporate poison designed to look harmless on paper. She looked up at the faces around her. Half of them avoided her eyes. The other half looked relieved someone else had said it. "Is this a joke?" Ava asked quietly. Elliot smiled, that same smile that never reached his eyes. "Not at all, Ava. You've done tremendous work. We just think it's best if you take some time. Reflect. Recharge. Reflect. Recharge." Words that sounded like concern but tasted like dismissal. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You want me gone?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "Let's not make this emotional." The room went silent. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Years of professionalism, restraint, and diplomacy collapsed in that moment. She stood up, slowly, deliberately. "You want to erase me, Elliot? You'll have to do it in front of everyone." He didn't flinch. "Then that's what we'll do." She walked out, her heels echoing through the hall. Each step felt heavier, not from defeat, but from something sharper, colder, resolve. Because somewhere between humiliation and injustice, Ava stopped being afraid. That night, she didn't go home. She went back to her office. The same office she'd built from scratch, the same one Elliot now wanted to empty. And she started digging. Emails. Contracts. Meeting transcripts. Every discrepancy, every unauthorized signature, every oversight she'd ignored for the sake of peace, now it all mattered. She found evidence of misappropriated funds, quiet kickbacks, and deals Elliot had made under her name. He hadn't just betrayed her. He'd used her. At 3 a.m., Ava's screen glowed in the dark. Her eyes burned, her pulse steady. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not out of relief, but recognition. They thought she was cornered. They didn't realize she was documenting every move. By dawn, she had what she needed. A file. A single folder labeled Truth. The next day, she arrived early. Dressed in sharp black, eyes unwavering. When she walked into that same boardroom, the one she'd been told to wait outside of, everyone froze. "Good morning," she said evenly, placing the folder on the table. "Before we begin, I have something to share." Elliot frowned. "Ava, this isn't." But she interrupted. "It's exactly what this is about." Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight, the kind of weight truth carries when it's been silenced too long. She handed the folder to the company's legal officer. "This is a detailed report of unauthorized deals made under my leadership, without my consent. Every signature. Every timestamp." A hush spread across the room. Elliot's smile vanished. Ava turned to the board. "You wanted transparency? Here it is." Then she looked directly at Elliot. "Let's see who needs a leave of absence now." The room erupted, murmurs, papers rustling, glances exchanged. But Ava didn't wait for their reactions. She picked up her phone, walked toward the door, and stopped just long enough to say, "By the way, I've already sent this to the press." Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. And as the door closed behind her, the only sound left in that boardroom was panic. But this wasn't victory. Not yet. Because the fallout that followed, the headlines, the backlash, the lies, would test Ava's strength more than any humiliation ever had. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. For 48 hours, silence filled the company like smoke, thick, choking, unavoidable. The leak had gone public. Headlines exploded across every business network. Corporate scandal exposed, unauthorized deals under CEO's name. Black woman CEO claims fraud, racism, and retaliation at Fortune 500 firm. The story spread faster than anyone could contain it. Overnight, Ava Brooks, once the polished symbol of progress, became a storm of controversy. Some called her a hero. Others called her a liar. But no one, not even Elliot, could ignore her anymore. By Monday morning, the boardroom was chaos. Lawyers, PR heads, and investors crowded the long glass table, their voices crashing over one another like waves in a hurricane. Elliot sat at the far end, trying to hold control, his face tight with manufactured calm. The company's survival, his survival, depended on how this meeting ended. And right at the center, sitting opposite him, was Ava. Silent. Composed. Watching. They tried to remove her, security guards at her door, locked access to her files, but she'd anticipated that. Every document had been backed up, encrypted, and sent to federal investigators. What they didn't realize was that Ava wasn't here to defend herself anymore. She was here to end this. The chairman banged his gavel. This is an emergency inquiry. Ms. Brooks, you've made serious allegations. I didn't make anything, Ava interrupted. I exposed it. Gasps. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Elliot's jaw tightened. Let's not be dramatic, he said smoothly. You're angry. We understand. But these claims are supported by your own emails, Ava said, sliding a printed sheet across the table. You authorized private payments to external consultants using company funds, under my signature. He glanced down, eyes narrowing. The logo on the paper was unmistakable. The signature, forged. His. Elliot's voice sharpened. This is out of context. Ava leaned forward. You want context? You told me to wait outside while you stole credit for my work. You sidelined me, undermined me, and when that didn't break me, you tried to destroy me. That's the context. The room went dead silent. Her voice rose, calm but cutting. You didn't just want power, Elliot. You wanted to remind me that I didn't belong here. That no matter how much I achieved, how perfect I was, I'd always be an outsider to people like you. For the first time, his mask cracked. He tried to laugh. Oh, please. Don't play the race card now. The words hung in the air like poison. Ava froze, just long enough for everyone to hear it. Then she stood. The race card, she said quietly. You think I wanted to make this about race? You made it about race the moment you told me to wait outside. The moment you took what I built and gave it to someone who looked like you. The moment you made me invisible in a company that used my face to sell its diversity. Every word landed like thunder. You built your empire on people like me, the ones who work twice as hard to earn half as much. You thought my silence meant acceptance. It meant patience. But I'm done waiting. The legal officer shifted nervously. Ms. Brooks, perhaps we should. Ava turned to the screen behind her. No. You should see. With one tap, the projector lit up, revealing footage, time-stamped and authenticated. Emails. Recordings. Meeting transcripts. Every act of sabotage and manipulation Elliot thought he'd buried under privilege and charm. Faces paled. Phones buzzed. The company's lead investor whispered something to his assistant and left the room. Elliot's composure broke. You had no right. I had every right, Ava shot back. You tried to take everything I earned. My work, my name, my dignity. You wanted me gone? Congratulations, I'm leaving. But not before the world knows why. She pulled a letter from her folder, her resignation. Signed, dated, deliberate. I won't be your scapegoat, she said, placing it in front of him. And I won't be your silence either. Elliot's voice cracked. You'll destroy us both. Ava smiled faintly. No. I'll destroy the lie you built, and finally be free of it. She turned to the board. You want to save this company? Start by saving its soul. Stop pretending inclusion is a marketing line. Stop pretending equality is a checklist. You don't fix racism with PR statements. You fix it by facing people like him and saying, enough. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Then, applause. Quiet at first, then growing. One by one, board members stood. A few with shame. A few with awe. Elliot sat frozen. Power slipping from his hands, reputation collapsing under truth he couldn't spin. Ava looked at him one last time. You told me to wait outside, she said softly. Now, it's your turn. She turned and walked out, calm, poised, unstoppable. The cameras outside the building flashed like lightning as she stepped into the sunlight. Reporters shouted her name, microphones swarmed, voices overlapping, but Ava didn't stop. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, the story wasn't just hers anymore. It was every woman who'd been silenced, every black professional told to wait their turn. Every person who'd been made to feel like a guest in their own success. The company behind her trembled under the weight of truth, but Ava? She was untouchable. Her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. She answered. A voice on the other end, Ms. Brooks? This is the New York Herald. We'd like to interview you about corporate racism in America. Are you ready to tell your story? Ava smiled, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Oh, she said softly. I've just started. The world finally heard her voice, but what came next would test her strength in ways even she couldn't predict. The headlines didn't fade overnight. They multiplied. CEO exposes corporate racism at the top. Ava Brooks resigns, sparks nationwide debate on diversity and power. The woman who wouldn't wait outside. Within days, her story became more than a scandal, it became a mirror. A reflection of everything people didn't want to talk about. Talk shows dissected her interviews. Commentators called her brave, reckless, controversial. But behind the noise, something undeniable began to stir. Employees from across industries, women, minorities, people who'd spent years biting their tongues, began to speak out. Anonymous posts. Open letters. Hashtags. We waited outside. Thousands of them. Each story echoed Ava's in different ways, the subtle dismissals, the closed-door decisions, the unspoken walls built on race and comfort. For the first time, people were listening. Ava never planned to become a symbol. She just wanted the truth to matter. But sometimes, truth doesn't ask permission before it changes everything. In the weeks that followed, Elliott Kane stepped down under internal investigation. The company's stock dipped, then slowly began to recover under new leadership, this time with a board that looked more like the world it claimed to serve. But Ava didn't go back. She didn't need to. She spent her mornings walking by the river now, without a schedule, without an inbox full of politics masquerading as professionalism. Some days, she'd stop to watch the water ripple and think about how quiet her life had become. Quiet, but not empty. Because from that quiet came something powerful, letters. Emails from young professionals across the world. You gave me the courage to speak up. Your story helped me see my worth. I thought I was the only one. Ava read every single one. Some she answered, most she couldn't. But all of them reminded her that change doesn't begin in boardrooms. It begins in the hearts of those who've been told to wait. She started writing again, not reports or strategies, but essays. About power. About dignity. About the silent racism that doesn't shout slurs but whispers not yet. Those essays became speeches. Those speeches became a movement. She was invited to universities, global forums, leadership conferences, places that once only invited her to listen, now asked her to teach. And each time she took the stage, she told the same story, not of revenge, but of revelation. They told me to wait outside, she would say. So I built a door of my own. The audience always fell silent. Because deep down, everyone recognized the story wasn't just hers. It was the story of every person who's been sidelined by systems that reward comfort over courage. But Ava knew the fight wasn't finished. Every applause, every headline, every token reform reminded her, progress isn't a moment. It's a maintenance. Racism doesn't always wear a face you can expose. Sometimes, it hides behind politeness. Behind professional tone. Behind not the right fit. It's subtle. Systemic. Sophisticated. And that's why it survives. Ava understood that now more than ever. One evening, she visited her old office building, not to confront, but to remember. The glass walls still gleamed under the city lights. The logo she once stood beneath still sparkled, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. A young black intern stood at the reception desk, confident and smiling. When she saw Ava, recognition lit her face. You're her, the girl said softly. You're the reason I applied here. Ava smiled. Then make sure they never make you wait outside. As she walked away, a quiet peace settled in her chest. Not victory, something deeper. Freedom. She realized that true power isn't the title you hold. It's what you do when they try to take it away. She'd lost her job. Her position. Her seat at the table. But she'd gained something far greater, her voice. And in the end, that was the one thing they could never take. Weeks later, when a journalist asked her if she regretted going public, Ava paused before answering. Regret, she said. No. The system counted on my silence. It never expected my story. The interviewer leaned in. And what do you want people to take from it? Ava smiled faintly. That sometimes the most radical act isn't fighting the system, it's refusing to shrink inside it. Her words went viral again. Not because they were loud, but because they were true. Across offices, schools, and homes, her story sparked conversations that had been buried for too long. People began asking harder questions. about representation, about tokenism, about what inclusion really means when power still looks the same. It wasn't a revolution. It was a ripple. But ripples, when they touch enough hearts, can become waves. And maybe, just maybe, that's how change begins, not with shouting, but with stories. Now, whenever people tell Ava's story, they focus on the boardroom, the confrontation, the downfall of the man who tried to erase her. But that's not the real story. The real story is what happened after. The quiet strength of a woman who refused to let hate dictate her worth. The reminder that silence is not peace, it's permission. And maybe that's the message we all need to hear today. Because how many times have we seen it happen? In offices, in classrooms, in neighborhoods, where someone is told to wait, to calm down, to be grateful? How many times have we looked away because it wasn't our fight? But racism doesn't end in policy papers or hashtags. It ends the moment we stop being comfortable witnesses to someone else's humiliation. So ask yourself, when it's your turn to speak up, will you wait outside? Or will you walk in? If Ava's story moved you, share it. Not for the views, but for the voices still waiting outside the door. Because the next story could be yours.